While we were all asleep, it seems that a new United States military operation has begun in the Caribbean. The Donald Trump administration has charged former Cuban President Raul Castro in connection with his role in the downing of 2 civilian planes back in 1996, which resulted in the deaths of Americans. Castro was accused of conspiring to kill United States citizens. And now lawyers and the military are insisting that this is just a pretext for launching a military operation against Cuba, similar to the one that took place in Venezuela in January of this year. At the same time, on the same day, a US Navy carrier strike group arrived in the Caribbean Sea and set its sights on Cuba. And Donald Trump himself stated directly the day before that he is ready to declare war on Cuba, since the regime on the island is not ready for diplomacy. Let's discuss this. Is this a new war? And why did Trump need to bring up a 30-year-old case to condemn Raul Castro? My name is Alexi Pichi. Let's discuss this topic together. But before we start, I ask you to subscribe to this YouTube channel, like this episode, and leave any comment you want. And friends, subscribe to my Telegram channel Peachy News. The link to it is in the description of this video. Also in the video description there's a link to my exclusively Ukrainian language YouTube channel. So if you want to watch my separate episodes in Ukrainian, be sure to go there and subscribe. And support the brand new, exclusively Ukrainian language YouTube channel. So, the US authorities have officially filed criminal charges against the former leader of Cuba, Raul Castro. Acting US Attorney General Todd Blanche stated that the indictment against former Cuban President Raul Castro sends a signal that those who kill Americans will be held accountable. He stated that this indictment marks the first time in nearly 70 years that high-ranking Cuban leaders have been charged by the US over the deaths of Americans. It is known that the list of charges brought against the former Cuban president carries a maximum sentence of life imprisonment if he is found guilty at trial. Furthermore, conspiracy with the intent to kill US citizens. The current president of Cuba, Miguel Díaz-Canel, has already stated that the charges brought by the US against his predecessor, Raul Castro, are, quote, a political maneuver with no legal basis, intended only to justify US aggression against his country. Next is the exact statement from Miguel Díaz-Canel. The alleged accusation against Army General Raul Castro Ruz, just announced by the US government, only demonstrates the arrogance and frustration felt by representatives of the empire because of the unwavering resilience of the Cuban Revolution, as well as the unity and moral strength of its leadership. The United States is lying about the events related to the 1996 downing of the plane carrying members of the Brothers to the Rescue Organization, which, as he stated, was a narco-terrorist organization. On February 24, 1996, Cuba acted within the framework of lawful self-defense within its territorial waters. After repeated and dangerous violations of our airspace by well-known terrorists, about which the then US administration was warned more than a dozen times, but ignored the warnings and allowed the violations. So what is this all about? At the beginning of 1996, 2 light Cessna aircraft based in Miami and belonging to the humanitarian organization Brothers to the Rescue were flying over the Florida Straits. The group was engaged in searching for and rescuing Cuban refugees who were trying to reach the territory of the United States of America, and sometimes also dropped leaflets over Cuba. Then, Cuban military MiG-29 fighter jets, following an order issued through the chain of command then controlled by Raul Castro himself, intercepted the planes. The planes were shot down by air-to-air missiles. The investigation determined that the attack took place over international waters, although Cuba claimed that the planes were in its airspace. 4 people were killed, 3 of whom were US citizens. The Cuban government was unhappy with this organization for openly opposing the Castro regime and supporting protests through airlifts. The return of the Cuban government to Cuba. Cuban government officials developed a plan called Operation Scorpion to take revenge and intimidate the Cuban exile community. The indictment alleges that the Cuban government, led by Castro, planted spies within the brothers to the rescue organization, and according to the prosecution, it was Castro who gave the order to shoot down civilian planes, fully aware of who was on board. And on the very day the US prosecution charged Castro, an American aircraft carrier arrived in the Caribbean Sea. Coincidence? I don't think so. The American military announced the arrival of the Nimitz Carrier Strike Group, which includes the aircraft carrier, its air wing, and at least one guided missile destroyer. As a result, Cuban officials see the charges against Castro as preparation for a military intervention, and that makes sense. Donald Trump has repeatedly stated the possibility of making a deal that could prevent a US attack on the communist island. Here is his quote. "I can make a deal, regardless of whether you change the regime or not. It was a brutal regime and they killed a lot of people. But this is a country that really needs help. They can't turn on the lights, they can't eat, we don't want to see that." And so the oil blockade of Cuba imposed by the Trump administration has pushed the island even closer to the brink of economic and humanitarian crisis. Sanctions against foreign companies doing business with the Cuban government have also forced some shipping companies importing food to Cuba to announce that they are ceasing their operations. The worsening electricity shortages and power outages have sparked isolated anti-government protests, something the Cuban authorities usually do not tolerate. And it's no coincidence that CIA Director Redcliffe recently visited Cuba. And now, the indictment of Raul Castro, who led the Cuban army during the plane crash, is raising tensions between Cold War-era adversaries to a level not seen in decades. These charges lay the groundwork for a possible US military operation to extradite him, just like what happened with Nicolas Maduro from Venezuela, who, by the way, is a close ally of Cuba. But unlike Venezuela, where Nicolas Maduro's army showed weak defense and was easily defeated by American troops, and his former allies quickly complied with Donald Trump's demands, Castro's supporters are likely to react much more aggressively. The Cuban military is already preparing to repel a potential US attack, and the current president, Díaz-Canel, has vowed that any invasion will be met with a bloodbath. That's his quote. All over the island, the military is conducting exercises and the government is warning the civilian population about the need to prepare for an attack. Any actions against Castro are likely to lead to a covert war, even though Cuba is, well, significantly inferior in terms of weaponry. And it's important to understand why they decided to target Castro, even though you would think the old man is already 94 years old. And here many might wonder why him specifically. Why Raul Castro and not, for example, the current president? The thing is, almost every high-ranking political and military official was personally selected by Raul Castro. And the secretary of the Communist Party, Díaz-Canel, claims that all important decisions in Cuba are made by Raul Castro himself. So, to put it in perspective, Raul Castro in Cuba is like Iran's supreme leader. I'll leave it at that. Share your opinions and conclusions in the comments below this episode, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and don't forget to like the video. If you want to support the work of this YouTube channel, you can do so financially by donating through the links and details in the description of this video or by using the QR code on your screen. And let me remind you to subscribe to my Ukrainian language YouTube channel as well. The link is also in the description of this video. That's all for now. Take care of yourselves. Goodbye, everyone.